Hi, good morning, guys. John Delia here for another round of how to build a subdivision. This is part 3. It's been a while since we made a video, so I wanted to hop back on, check in, share where we're at in the process, what's been going on, and hopefully provide some value to you as you go on your journey to build your own subdivision. So just like the other couple of videos, I'm going to share my screen, work through a guide presentation for my thoughts, and we'll jump right in. So here we are, how to build a subdivision. Like I said, part 3, John Delia with Housing Joint Venture. Thank you guys for joining. We'll do a quick recap. Where are we? What have we been doing? So previously in other videos, you'll know that we thought it was 7.5 acres. It turned out to be 7.7 acres back in July of 2020. Our goal is to build a single family subdivision, so single family houses. The land currently is wooded, meaning it's raw land. There's trees all over, and the site needs a lot of work to prep for development. We are going to have to get approval from the city, although we are zoned for a low density residential neighborhood. The city still is going to approve the subdivision from being one parcel of 7.7 to 17 individual deeded lots. And I will say, once again, this is my first subdivision ever, so I've definitely been in gladiator school is what we'll call it. There's been a lot of help from YouTube University, a lot of help from hiring a lot of great professionals, consultants, etc., and just purely being curious. So definitely, if you're going to go on this journey, remember, you got to be curious. It's going to be an adventure, lots of roadblocks along the way, hurdles, but that's part of just the practice of learning and growing. So I want to give you a quick update on some milestones. We are raising funds to finally pay for the rest of the subdivision. I've done a lot significantly. This is our own platform, Housing Joint Venture, and we have our own deal listed. Our subdivision project is called the Belmont Preserve LLC. And because I'm logged into my account, I have a lot of the diligence documents here uploaded to the platform. But I'm just going to click on over here, which is project milestones to date, and give you guys an idea of where we've been. So, like I said, in July of 2020, we purchased 7.5 acres in Springfield, Ohio. I started interacting with the city on and off that summer, and by January, we were interacting, getting feedback, and asking the city for some questions. That February, we found a comprehensive, basically research analysis for a feasibility study that was sponsored by a local municipality and economic development stakeholders. And it was very helpful and saved us some time in terms of creating our own research and feasibility. By March of 2021, I went ahead and started creating a business plan on paper for what is it we were trying to accomplish. Back then, we assumed that we would be able to do 22 homes of a subdivision. Then April 2021, it was great to see that the US Today publication posted that Springfield, Ohio is the 5th hottest housing market in the country. So, not to our surprise, because there's a reason strategically we invested in Springfield, but it was good to see the external validation. Also that month, I went ahead and hired a law firm so that we could be able to fundraise legally for the project. Obviously, there's multiple ways to finance the project. We've chose to fund some of this project out of pocket, and now we'll bring on additional capital with both fundraising and bank loans. In May 2021, we consulted with a company to identify what trees are worth keeping, what is valuable, what's not valuable, and the costs to clear the land. Because as I mentioned, because it is wooded, we're going to have to clear it and do significant site work in terms of grading and preparation before we can break it down into individual lots. July 2021, so a full year after we purchased the land, we finally signed a contract with a local surveying company. In Clark County, there are only 3 surveyors. We joke and say that, hey, of those 3, we're working with the youngest firm or the youngest surveyor, and himself, Mark, is about 70 years old. So, it took some time to get on the list, but we finally made it. In July 21, we started visiting manufacturers for different housing framing systems. We're not going to build this subdivision out of lumber. We saw a lot of commodity price inflation during COVID, a lot of supply chain shortages, and the cost of lumber was significant. So for us, we were looking for how can we help foster housing innovation and what methods could we utilize to be cost effective and help us get this project done efficiently. We discovered CFS, which is called cold form steel. I encourage you to take a look at it. Maybe it will be something you'd like to consider for your project. By September 2021, we began to build out the financial model. Now, me, myself, I'm not an expert using Excel. I leaned on my network. So one of our investment managers is a former Goldman Sachs guy. He's also a real estate investor. We did a joint venture or two previously, and he assisted in creating the first model for the project. After that model was created, I shopped it around with other guys in finance and private equity that I know. We utilized their opinions for feedback, how we could optimize the model and how we could make the model better. And that's what gave us our ultimate model, which is now used for fundraising and used for our projections. By February 2022, we filed a new company, Belmont Preserve LLC. This is the site-specific entity that's going to manage the fundraising and operation of the subdivision. By March 2022, we had the final surveying completed. So you'll notice we signed the contract back in, when was that? Right here, back in July 21. And it wasn't until March of 22 that we finally got the surveying complete, boundary pins reset, and everything completed. So there was a bit of a time lag to get that done. And honestly, a lot of that was being patient to when the surveyor could fit us in their schedule for that size site. In March that month, now that we had the completed survey, we moved forward and hired a local firm to do our civil engineering. And really with the civil engineering, that's what we're using to submit to the city. The civil engineer's job is to help us with the stormwater calculations, where the roads and infrastructure will be, and how the site will tie into the city infrastructure, such as, main water, main sewer, etc. After we got that conceptual design back in April of 2022, we met with city officials across different departments, from city zoning to the city water department, the fire department, etc., to get their feedback on, what did they think of our conceptual design? What concerns might they have before we build this or bring this to the public? And, something I learned is our site specifically, when you look at the grading of our site, or I should say the topography, there's a steep drop from one side of the site to the other. And, one of the city officials had mentioned, hey, typically when we're doing snow plowing and snow removal, we push snow downhill, not uphill. And, that's something that we're going to have to deal with in terms of our site topography and the site elevations. And it also influenced the site design. We lost a couple of lots because of the retention pond necessary to catch that storm water and that water runoff. So that meeting was very helpful. I tend to believe that you're going to learn a lot of this process while doing it and on the job training. Obviously, you can go to graduate school, you can take courses, etc. But there's nothing like being in the meetings with the specific site-specific plans and your engineers and all officials coming together, collaborating and questioning that specific site. Each site is going to be different, and those nuances are what are going to allow you to understand what barriers you face, what hurdles you have to overcome, and how to move the project forward. Fast forward now to May 2022. We're finally ready to submit our application for the subdivision itself to the city of Springfield. Once we do so, we'll get in front of the public officials to get approval to subdivide it from one specific parcel to 17. In July, our civil engineer said, hey, John, we're ready to go. Let us know when you're ready to submit to the city. So that's really where we're at with the next steps. In July, also, we were able to get our final private placement memorandum completed through our attorney and our legal team. That allows us to sell securities, which are going to be exempt, but they are registered with the Security and Exchange Commission. And now we can raise funds through a 506c offering, which basically means we can generally solicit, or we could publicly market online, on social media. We can make, cold calls, etc. But we have to ensure that the investor is what's known as an accredited investor, meaning individually they make 200,000 or more a year, or as a family 300,000. Otherwise, they have to have $1 million in assets, excluding their personal residence. And what I'm finding is typically when you look at people who live on the coast, we're in Ohio. I am personally from New York. So when I think about New Yorkers and people from California, I tend to believe that they're going to be our target investor because they're already making a higher income. And 9 times out of 10, we found that investors in California might not own a personal residence, but due to that high income, they're automatically considered accredited. So, this date is wrong, but this should say August 22. And here we go, August 22. We got an EIN number from the IRS so we could open up a bank account for that fundraising. And at this point, we're officially ready to raise money, and we are in fundraising mode. We're talking to a couple of firms, we're talking to investors, and we're trying to onboard the necessary capital to move this project forward. So, I encourage you as you're going through this, make something similar, create a chart of milestones and document your progress and your success. Every step forward, moving forward, is something to be proud of. And you should definitely be proud of yourself as you go through this journey. So now let's talk about some of the costs and what we've been spending money on. So first and foremost, we got site control before we tried to raise any outside capital, meaning I personally put the money up and we have a mortgage, and I make the monthly payments now for nearly 2 years for the acquisition and the purchase of the land. We purchased 7.7 acres for about $40,000 back in 2020. Next, we have money in research, planning, and consultants. I'd say nearly $10,000 in consulting fees and planning fees and research fees, etc. Next, you have conceptual design and site plan. That's from our civil engineering, etc. That's nearing about $20,000 in cost. We have our initial boundary retracement and pin setting for the property surveyor. That cost us about $3,000, and there might be more fees additionally as we move the project forward. As I mentioned, the preliminary site plan, that's in addition to conceptual design, so that's all lumped into the same cost. And now where we'll go next with the fees are city fees, in terms of there's a fee for the application submission, and then there's a fee for cost per lot. So depending on the number of lots, you get charged an individual fee, and that total aggregate we expect to be, let's say, nearing $5,000 or so, etc. So those are the costs we have to date, but they're obviously going to continue to be more costs as we keep moving forward. So how do you develop your initial budget? And this is something that's going to be unique to your own site. It depends on how large your site is, who you're working with, etc. So I'd just like to say we split the budget up into a couple of costs. There's soft costs, which means those are the pre-development costs of, engineering, planning, research, etc., marketing, entity filing. Those are your soft costs. Then you're going to have your horizontal costs, which are, what is it going to cost us to do our anything horizontal plane, meaning the land development, the land preparation, the cost to move dirt, the cost to clear the land, the cost to move the trees, the cost to tap into city infrastructure. All of that's going to go into our horizontal costs. And then finally, you'll have vertical costs going to the sky, meaning what is it going to cost to actually develop a home, develop a property, and the construction cost. Now, those obviously are going to keep evolving. Those are going to be in our financial model. I'll try to pull up a copy of that model for us here and give you an idea of what our model looks like. So where we are in the process, we kind of went through those milestones, but I just want to give you an idea. If you watched earlier videos of how to build a subdivision through us, you'll look on the left. This left is the image that our team initially made internally prior to engaging a civil engineer. We did some conceptual, what do we think we could put on this footprint of 7.7 acres when we thought it was 7.5. And this was a 22 home subdivision. So we utilized this as the initial feasibility for what we based our business case off of and what we based our model off of. And now where we are today, if you look on this photo on the right, this is what was submitted via our civil engineer. And it shows the lot sizes, the dimensions. The engineer, the civil engineer, overlaid his work on top of our surveyor's work. So our surveyor gave us the boundary retracement, set pins to let us know our lot lines. They also identified all these neighboring parcels you'll see here on the outer periphery. I'm kind of hovering around them. And so we know who owns what. And you'll see that it's kind of not a major change, but it is drastic in the sense that, our civil engineer is hired to help you optimize your site. So initially, we were going to spend a lot of money, as you see here on the left, in roads by making this circular road with this center island, etc. And now, based on the city code and the city zoning, we're doing 2 cul-de-sacs that have specific dimensions in terms of street size, road size, cul-de-sac sizes, etc. And we'll actually save some money in asphalt and concrete because now, there are 2 cul-de-sacs with 1 main apron entrance. That entrance goes all the way to the main road. So here's an idea of pre-civil engineering versus post-civil engineering. So once again, what have we accomplished? We've done our initial surveying, we've done our preliminary design, we've submitted an application to the city. We've begun to identify subcontractors for cost estimating. And one thing we did to get or identify who those subcontractors would be, one method could be go on Google and type in plumber, etc. Instead, we went to the city website and we pulled city permitting data to figure out who was pulling permits for gas lines, for water lines, for electrical lines, etc. We like to go out about 90 days and we pulled 3 months worth of data. And we said to ourselves, okay, if these contractors have been pulling permits in the last 3 months, they're engaged with the city, they understand the application and the permitting process, and they'll understand the updated market cost of what it costs to do what we're looking to do. And we created a spreadsheet of who we could outreach towards to start getting some estimate and costs. Next, we created a brand and identity for the subdivision. Remember, this subdivision is now called the Belmont Preserve. It's a 17-home subdivision. We identified the branding, we identified the home aesthetic, we identified kind of the resident persona of who do we see living in our subdivision, who do we want to attract with the design style, etc. Next, we began to reach out to environmental and soil companies to say, hey, look, we got to begin the process of soil testing, etc. And we have to begin the process of what is it going to take to clear the land and prepare the land. And that brings us to the final point of site grading and clearing contractors. You're going to take your civil engineering plan, and based on that civil engineering plan, they're going to give you detailed diagrams on the grading and on site condition. And that's really what's going to inform your contractors on how to give you a proper quote for that specific piece of land. So how do we create our financial model? So what I'll do is I'll pull up the financial model. As I mentioned, we worked with first internal team, and then we shopped it around to professionals who are in the industry to give us feedback. This is a PDF of the model, a page of it, but essentially the model has varying assumptions. Let me zoom out a little bit. Let me give you another page. So this model gives us a budget for the land development. What we did was we analyzed this model doing a couple of scenarios, a worst, a base case, and a best case. The model improved once we reduced it from 22 homes to 17 lots, which is, you would think, more homes, more cost effective. However, by getting down and more granular with more data, the model got better. And we're able to project now in the worst case scenario, we don't lose any money. And in the best scenario, we are profit. And what we did was we did projections for both a sale of the product and a rental of the product. So for us, as we were talking to different stakeholders, different private equity firms, we learned that when you build to rent, it's a non-taxable event because it's using debt. So the IRS is not taxing you based on debt, they're taxing you based on a capital gain. So as the project moves forward and as we deliver completed units, we'll look to see during market conditions of once we're finally constructed, does it make more sense to hold on to this as somewhat of a BRRRR method? I'll call it build, renovate, refinance, repeat. So refinancing, maybe the cash out is better as a non-taxable event, as opposed to building it, selling each individual lot, and each lot you're going to get hit with capital gains. Then you divide your time it took to build, your capital gains, and there's you get your net profit for yourself as a developer. And then once again, we have a breakdown of what are the soft costs in terms of environmental, surveying, application, architectural, engineering, etc. As we move this project along, in the beginning, you're going to have less tangible data. You're making a lot of assumptions and you're kind of ballparking it. But the more you push the project forward, the more you engage other professionals, the easier it's going to get to refine those numbers. So 2 years later, we're a lot clearer now that we have tangible numbers, where initially we didn't understand what was it going to cost for civil engineering. We didn't know what was it going to cost for surveying. Those numbers get more clarified as you move the project forward, and that allows you to get a budget. So for us, we're assuming right now to date that the construction cost of this project is going to cost us about $2.8 million. We also, now with more information, we did a page of comps and we found that we purchased the property for about $5,100 per acre. Now, when you go on the internet and you look at comps, this home has disappeared, but it was for sale. So we'll just click on another link. We're finding that other sites in the neighborhood are trading. Here, if you look to the right, $120,000 for 0.44 acre lot. And that's just up the road from us. You'll also see another lot here, $35,000 for 3 parcels. So we're finding that the inflation of the pricing around us has increased significantly since we purchased our land. So now we have built-in equity based on the fact that the sites around us are being sold for smaller sites for a lot more money. And luckily, we locked in that price years in advance. Building a subdivision is definitely going to take years, is what we found, as opposed to being rushed with an infill lot development, etc. So now let's jump back to the presentation. So that's pretty much how we created our financial model, and you got a chance to see at least some of what our model looks like. Don't be scared to just download something off the internet, try to build something in Excel yourself, and then be vulnerable enough to shop it around for feedback. Take it to a local banker, take it to a mortgage person, take it to someone who understands finance, and get feedback. The more feedback, the better. Your goal is to strictly improve, make your model better, refine it with each iteration, and ultimately, put your best foot forward. If you're new to this project, you probably won't have it all figured out. We definitely didn't, but you're definitely going to keep making progress as you move forward. So just have the courage to start and the courage to work your way through any hurdles or any barriers, because you're going to face barriers. So that's just some food for thought. Now, I'll tell you, when I bought this, my goal is to actually become a developer. I'm 32 years old now. I've been in real estate for about 12 years. And long term, when COVID came, I recognized that renovating old homes is unpredictable. Renovating old homes is very custom. Every house is custom, and it's not really a scalable solution. So I wanted to enter a new part of the business where I said to myself, how could things be managed via project management schedules? How could we get more granular and more detailed with our numbers, our costs, and our assumptions up front? And how could we have a more streamlined building and construction process? So initially, because I purchased this land at what I believe is a great price, $40,000, Springfield, Ohio is about 45 minutes from the capital where I live currently, and I've been investing in Columbus. And when I was looking at land prices in Columbus, you'd pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for comparable sites. So I knew that for me personally, as a former New Yorker, proximity and commuting is okay when people are searching for affordability. So I said to myself, my goal is to build a subdivision. Initially, I'm not concerned with the price or the cost, because in the future, it's going to be more expensive. So anyone who says, oh, it's very expensive, yes, it's expensive now, but it's going to just be more expensive. So the sooner I can learn and the sooner I can get experience, the better off I'll be. Because I have financing on this deal, I have a mortgage for 14 years. So I have a time horizon of 14 years. And at my current interest rate, even when I pay, let's say, the full life of the loan, if I pay the full 14 years, I'd end up paying around $100,000+ for the site, but it's still fairly affordable in my belief. So with that said, you have to have your goals and priorities of what you're trying to accomplish and what plan you're trying to accomplish. Depending on your financing or how you get your capital, it will shift how you move and what you go about doing. So just be mindful of your financing sources. So what are some potential exit strategies for this subdivision? So a couple. So one, we can sell the approved plans to a builder. When I bought the site, it was one lot, it wasn't recently surveyed, and it had no conceptual design for what the city zoning allowed it for. Now that I've hired engineers and I'm going to have final approved plan by the city, I can sell that complete package to a home builder or a developer with an increase where I add my cost of land, my cost of labor, my time, and I sell it to them where they can go out and build this site and they can develop the lots and they can see the construction forward. Another option is I can sell the individual lots. So I can take the site further with my approved plans, put the roads in, do the rest of the horizontal construction, get individual lots ready, and then I can sell each lot to a homeowner who can get their own construction loan and they can build their home on that lot where I make money that way. Now, my plan is to do 3 and 4, where I actually want to build the spec homes myself because my goal is to become the home builder and get the experience building at scale. And I'll have the option to either sell those units finally or build the homes to rent. But ideally, currently, my plan is to build to rent and hold these as a long-term rental community. And another reason that I'm influenced by building to rent is because, as I mentioned earlier, on one end, it's about capital gains and not paying a tax, and real wealth is built by using debt. But on another end, I recognize that when you renovate old homes, you're always going to have more that goes wrong with the property. And in real estate investment and development, there's an improvement known as a CapEx, meaning anything more than maintenance, where I'm replacing a roof or replacing a furnace or putting siding on the building. That's a bigger capital improvement than traditional. And what I realized is by building these homes from the ground up today, let's say when we break ground in 2023, we don't expect to have to do any significant maintenance or repairs or remodels, meaning no new furnaces, no new hot water heaters, because everything is going to be new. And by it being new, I expect that we should buy ourselves about at least 10 years of no significant improvements, which means that it's going to be a fairly predictable rental community of what needs to be done for maintenance and upkeep. So we actually are assuming lower long-term needs for maintenance and upkeep, as long as we ensure that we have a quality construction process and quality assurance through that construction process. So these are 4 options on exit strategies, and you should consider what is your exit strategy with your subdivision and what's your time horizon for that exit strategy. So what are the expectations for time and completion? Going into this, I assumed that the project would move forward a lot quicker. I didn't recognize that it would take nearly a year to get a survey. I didn't recognize that it would take nearly a year and a half to get civil engineering. And I would tell you, be mindful. And if you don't initially have a team, because you're new and don't have those relationships, you're going to be the low person on the totem pole in terms of that company's priorities for executing the deal. So, subdivisions, I tell people now, you should expect to be anywhere from 3 to 5 years for development. The first 24 to 36 months, you're just getting through your soft development and your horizontal construction. And then I expect that once you get into construction, it might take you anywhere from a year and a half to actually complete that construction. So just be mindful. So what are some lessons with working with an architectural firm? Through this process, we've also been engaging with an architectural firm to design a home. And the goal is that we really want to design not only a modern home, but a home that a family is going to want to live in and grow in. And we thought to ourselves, why not work with an architectural firm to really, initially I was working, well, not working, but we pulled plans off the internet and that gave us our initial feasibility. But ultimately, when we want to build a desirable product, I think it is very helpful to work with an architect, etc. But just be mindful that they're going to have their own time frame and their own time lags. So unless you have some hardcore cutoff dates and deadlines, just be mindful of what it takes to go back and forth to do redlining, plan reviews, plan revisions, etc. And then be mindful that when you're working with an architect, you want to ask them either how many subdivisions they've built or how many homes they've built, and how do they estimate from a design standpoint what the cost of construction is going to be. Because ultimately what you don't want to occur is an architect to design something that's not economically feasible to be built. Your concern should be about what is the cost of construction, what is it going to cost me to build this product, and that's not always the architect's job to do. And if you're not experienced, you might not recognize that that ultimate design might not be feasible. So one thing I do like about the plan websites is that Some of those plan websites let you know that this is a cost-effective model. It can be built efficiently. They also allow you to download a materials list, etc., for what it might cost you to build. So, when do you need an architect? You're going to need a site plan, floor plans, elevations, hopefully construction drawings. And think about the construction drawings as just being the detailed plans that you or your contractor is going to need to determine, how do we build this? How do those connections happen? What goes in what order? What is the mechanical and electrical plumbing, etc.? And finally, what's the cost structure? How much is it going to cost, and what is it going to take to build? Give me 1 second, YouTube. We have a visitor joining us. Hi, Baron. Give me 1 second, buddy. We're recording the video. You want to be in the video? Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. Okay, friends. During this process, we also introduced a new child in our household. Meet Baron. Baron's the future third-generation home builder, and he says he wants to be in the meeting with us. So Baron's going to be in the meeting. So once again, we had our initial home plans versus the architect. Right now, we believe that the plans we developed with our architect are not necessarily fully feasible for construction. So we're still leaning and gearing towards the initial house plans we selected. But we're not going to throw those plans out. We're just going to keep value engineering and working through what is it going to take to build that architectural plan that we designed. So definitely try to identify an architecture firm, try to identify the civil engineering firm, and try to identify your surveying firm as soon as possible. Even if you don't have a site in contract or you don't own land already, start building those relationships, network on LinkedIn, do whatever it takes, but make sure you start building your team as soon as possible. So let's talk about the difference between infill lots and subdivisions, which are multiple acres. And what I'll tell you is that with any building project, I recognize that now you should probably start small. It's a lot easier to develop those relationships and have a more expedited timeline if you are doing an individual lot. So over here on the left, you'll notice that you'll meet your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing subcontractor sooner than if you did a larger acreage. You'll also be able to engage with the city on an individual lot to learn how does the city planning work? How does the city zoning work? What does the building permit look like? What is it going to take to submit the building application? You'll be able to talk to the city engineers and water department about how much is it going to cost to tap into the city utilities? What does it take to tap into those utilities? And you'll also get a better understanding of the price per square footage to build. By building an infill individual lot, you'll get to construction quicker, and hopefully you'll take that knowledge and just scale it up to larger acres. Next, if you're going to start with larger acres, just know that you're going to need a lot of intermediaries to move forward, and that timeline can take a lot longer than if you were to do an infill. It can take long periods of time to see progress, so you can't quit. You have to stay consistent, and you're going to have to be able to keep yourself on a follow-up schedule and, just keep doing little mini iterations of whatever you can do to move the project forward. And also know that with larger subdivisions, until you move the project forward, your costs are still unknown and fairly volatile. It wasn't until we started talking to the city officials with our civil engineer in a Zoom meeting that we could even get more detailed costs, because until you understand the site grading, until you understand the utility connections, etc., it's going to be very difficult to get clear feasibility. So your model is just an assumption. Most people want to predict for the best forecasts. I'd say try to be a little more conservative, and I don't want to say realistic, but just as conservative as possible until those numbers are clear. But know that those numbers won't be clear until you actually move the dirt, and until you're actually building. For the most part, numbers change based on the economy and based on the market. In today's environment, interest rates are rising. In today's environment, it's more costly for dumpsters. There's a labor shortage. There's some, slowdown in the supply chain when it comes to building materials, etc. So just know that all of these externalities are going to affect what you're able to accomplish and how you're able to accomplish it. So I'd highly recommend start small, purchase an individual lot, practice, get good at it. And then in your business plan, you should say that, look, we're going to start with 1 lot or 2 lots, and then we're going to ramp up to 7 acres, 10 acres, 50 acres, whatever it is next. So I've kind of touched on this, but I want to talk about some lessons post-city meeting. One thing that I wasn't familiar with is public versus private streets. Are you going to maintain the upkeep of your streets and your roads, or are you going to turn those roads over to the city? You know, I mentioned about the grading of the site and pushing snow uphill versus downhill. Are you going to have the necessary, or not necessary, but are you going to install, you know, sidewalks? Are you going to install the curb cuts for ADA accessibility, etc.? So the city officials are really they're going to be your verification to verify is what's in your plan matching the city building code and the city zoning code, because every city is going to have a detailed code for what it takes for subdivisions based on the zoning of your land. So I'd highly suggest engage your city officials sooner rather than later and view them as partners in the project, because ultimately for us, I'd say Springfield has been very receptive, but not only that, there's a need for housing. There's a strong demand for a housing supply. So the goal of the city is also to not just, you know, poo-poo on your project or create challenges for you, but their goal is to deliver economic development through the creation of jobs, economic development through the creation of new taxpayers, new property taxpayers, new municipal taxpayers, and also, you know, through the new residents and the new voters. So the city's goal is to have more housing, and just know that they're going to be your allies, not your adversaries. So once again, I talked about the public versus the private streets. Follow the subdivision standards for subdivision streets. Are you going to have an HOA to maintenance the pond and the roads if they are private? What are you going to need to do in terms of a maintenance agreement signed by the developer that can be transferred? You know, we don't need rezoning, but we do need to go to the planning board because it is a major subdivision greater than 5 lots, etc. So, you know, previously our roads were 65 feet. The standard road is actually 50 feet, so we could shrink those. And how large do we want tree-lined trees of the cul-de-sac? So, you know, are we going to leave the existing trees or do we want to remove them? These are all things you need to consider. So our land and site challenges. So, you know, because of the grading, as I mentioned, it could present a problem in terms of the stormwater. And, you know, we need somewhere to dump the snow and essentially an emergency overflow. So now we have a way larger basin, a water retention pond than we expected. It's taking up about 2 lots at a 0.3 something acres. I will show you that shortly. Actually, I'll just show it to you now so we can actually keep it in real time. So once again, we're on our platform. I'll pull up our civil engineering plan and I'm just going to zoom in and you'll see, 0.78 of an acre, almost a full acre is going to this water retention pond right there, you know? So that's a fairly large site. The other thing the civil engineering plan gives us is if I scroll down, as I mentioned, they give you your proposed sections of what your cul-de-sacs look like in terms of grading, in terms of connections. It also gives us, I want to give you the topography map. Now, on this map, what you'll notice is on this left side, you'll see an elevation of 1028. And it actually goes all the way down to down here at 990. So you see that slope is going, it's uphill, but it's really going downhill. And it's gonna, our water retention basin right there is gonna catch all that extra excess and that storm water. So, you know, those are definitely things that we have to consider with our site. The pond is water retention. It needs a liner to hold water. So when I call it a pond, it's actually just a retention. It's not a pond until I put a liner. Otherwise, we can put rocks in the bottom to keep it clear. And how do we keep it clean with water levels stable? So those are all things we're going to have to consider and learn. So what are some key takeaways? Next time, start with a residential lot. Start with an infill lot for your subdivision. Pricing is always going to fluctuate and be volatile. So, you know, you're not going to get that level of consistency until you keep moving the project forward. Be resilient, be patient, and be a problem solver. You know, your job is to solve complex problems. And one of the problems is that this acreage was wooded and never developed. And, you know, we have an obstacle or a goal of turning it into a community. Create systems from day one. This is going to keep you structured and organized. Explore and research how to become vertically integrated, meaning how could you bring some of the design, the construction, etc., internally if you expect to do this long term. And also explore and research paths for cost savings and innovation. As I mentioned, we're considering cold form steel as our building framing system of choice, as opposed to lumber or anything else. So that's it for this episode. I'll hop back over to our website shortly just to see if there's anything else helpful. But to give you an idea of what our survey looked like once it was completed, here it is. We have a stamp from our surveyor. And I'll just zoom in a little. All of these little black dots are the pins that were reset that let us know our boundaries, which is awesome. Glad we have it. I showed you the civil engineering plan. I'll give you an idea. Like I said, we are raising funds to do this deal. It's through a private placement memorandum. The offering allows us to raise up to $4 million, but as I mentioned earlier, we expect the total project cost to be around $3 million. So, you know, once again, just for some highlights, we're building a 17-home subdivision over 5 years. You know, project cost is nearly $3 million. Our minimum shares are 25 or 25,000. We're giving our investors an 8% preferred return, and they're going to have 60% of the net proceeds. Our 40% is what it cost us to get this project to where it is to date. And what we'll do afterwards, this just breaks down some capital distribution. We gave a basic timeline. So here's an updated timeline. We're really, right now, we're focused on fundraising. By October through January, we expect the final phase pre-development activities, including the final civil engineering, topography survey if it's necessary, soil testing, and obtaining the final city approvals. From February to March, we're going to coordinate off-site construction and material sourcing. So as I discussed, the framing systems and the structural panels of the house, we plan to manufacture off-site. By June and August, we plan to begin the horizontal development, including land clearing, grading, individual lot staking, and utility infrastructure installed. And then hopefully by September to June of the following year, we're going to be doing the 17 homes complete. And by July, we'll know if we're selling or leasing, etc. And I'll just leave you guys with a final update of what our current home plans look like and our home designs look like with a mood board. Each plan is a 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,230 square feet. Our target demographic is a millennial family who's looking for a starter home, or an empty nester / boomer who's downsizing and doesn't want to walk up and down stairs. Be very specific about who your customer is. And thank you guys for watching. Once again, my name is John Delia. We're building a subdivision in Springfield, Ohio. This was part 3, and I'll circle back again as we continue this journey. Thanks for watching. Take care.